with, say, Georgia or North Carolina that have 16 each, and there's a few other ways you can do it too.
What about Pennsylvania, though? Can she replace that, or is it really critical?
That's really a tough one because it has 19 electoral votes. She'd have to win at least 2 of those Sun Belt states, like North Carolina and Georgia together, or, say, Arizona and Nevada together. So a little bit harder if she loses Pennsylvania, and she's polling better in those 3 blue wall states.
What other ways does Trump have to win?
Well, he could build the wall, the red wall, let's call it. If he were to win Pennsylvania, Wisconsin, and Michigan, he would be very close to the 270 that he needs. He would just need one Sun Belt state to go over the top, and that's very possible given his strength with blue-collar white voters and a majority of eligible voters in the blue wall states, white voters without college degrees.
Okay, a lot to watch. Sounds like we're going to have a very long night.
Maybe a few days.
Yes, that's NPR's Domenico Montanaro. Domenico, thank you so much.
You got it.
And to see Domenico's analysis of the map laid out on your screen, go to npr.org. How do you solve homelessness? The question has become a top issue in San Francisco's mayor's race. The city has one of the highest rates of homelessness in the U.S. The candidates are offering different solutions.
Now I remember why I don't come here.
Why?
Because they're idiots.
What happened?
Bring up the right one. Bring up what he fucking thought he heard because he doesn't speak English. Just fucking pissed me off.
And now a story about how each
So how Lonnie just speaking to taking orders.
Well, then I'm trying to get his attention. I'm like, hey, excuse me, sir. And he's ignoring him. It's like, fuck you.
Spends a lot of time at the Melbourne Museum. A few years ago, one of the nations, he and his colleagues
So he made it this way when he wanted to correct it.
I fixed it.
Huh?
preserve the ethanol. He has
Corrected.
The guy's got a piece of this under his coat.
was the only marsupial apex predator that we had. When it was hunted to extinction, it left an enormous gap in the ecosystem.
Past works for Colossal Biosciences, a biotech company attempting to bring back species that have gone extinct.
Should ask him for a permit.
They still can't
What are you
create
gonna do?
life where there is none.
I said, why? It's not concealed.
Magically
Going the wrong way.
sensors. So the way that the extinction science works is you have to
What do you mean by concealed?
material.
You have it hidden.
Huh?
It's not like
It's hidden underneath the cat.
everybody else.
They shot them up, they brought it in, they prepared the pelt for taxidermy, and then when they finished doing the pelt preparation, they literally sawed their head off and then dropped that into a bucket of ethanol.
6 or so months ago, NASA found this skinned head of the black collection covered in the museum.
Despite the thing looking pretty gruesome,
kind of buses.
basically a covered, elongated military jeep, except this one is purple and blue and adorned with geometric designs. Chrome bumpers sparkles, so does the
At least this piece is something I really follow.
Driver Mario Ramirez says the vehicle attracts a lot of attention.
Gonna get a lot of honking smilers.
Despite its striking looks, an air horn also attached to the hood hints at the Jeepney's advanced age. Manufactured in 1946, it's pushing 80 years old.
At the end of World War II, American GIs departed the Philippines and left behind thousands of Willys Jeeps.
This is part of a short film by Sara Lee, a pop musician with Filipino roots who's based in the San Francisco Bay Area.
Each vehicle was customized to reflect the personal identity of the driver and handed down from generation to generation.
Sara Lee found this particular Jeepney on eBay. He used it in the film and on the cover of a recent album.
And so last year he donated it to the cultural district and we're using it to do jeepney tours.
That's Raquel Redondiez. She's the director of San Francisco's Filipino Cultural District, and she's sitting in the back of the jeepney pointing out significant sights along the way. There are a handful of us on this tour. Redondiez says if we were in the Philippines, this jeepney would be crowded with people squashed in, even on the roof.
In the Philippines, the funnest part is riding tugboat.
San Francisco is home to one of the largest Filipino communities in the country. Redondiez says people originally came here as cheap labor more than 100 years ago.
So much of that history has been buried and untold. And so a lot of the work of the cultural district is unearthing these stories.
We pass by St. Patrick's, the 19th century Catholic church that originally served the local Irish community and is now an important spiritual hub for Filipino residents and visitors.
They still have Filipino mass once a month.
And areas such as around the convention center, where working class Filipino people once lived. Redondiez says most of them were pushed out during redevelopment in the 1960s.
Part of our work is really about reclaiming space and reclaiming the neighborhood.
One of the ways they're doing this is through art, such as the towering, newly restored mural depicting the waves of Filipino immigration to the US. It shows figures important to Filipino Americans, from an indigenous chief to the co-founder of the United Farm Workers.
Joanna Pote painted this mural 40 years ago, and she helped lead the restoration along with younger Filipino artists.
Even the neighborhood's utility boxes have been artistically transformed. They have simple pictures on them of a mother and two people hugging, and they make the boxes look like oversized language learning flashcards.
To teach Filipino alphabet and words.
Redondiez says her organization soon hopes to offer regular jeepney tours. In the Philippines, meanwhile, the government aims to replace these rickety, mostly diesel-powered vehicles with less polluting modern ones. So it might not be too long before San Francisco is one of the few places left on Earth where you can still take a ride in an old-fashioned jeepney. Chloe Veltman, NPR News, San Francisco.
This is NPR News.
From the Witches of Salem to Stephen King's chilling stories, Americans have a deep fascination with horror. In just 10 minutes, we'll talk to an author who digs into that obsession and what it reveals about us. Stay
Hey,
tuned.
Sweaty.
No, it's just all syrup at the bottom.
Buenos dias. How's your Sunday going? This is CPR News and KRCC. I'm Arlo Perez Esquivel. This is Weekend Edition. Fall is here, and gardeners
That's
are
all right.
always
Got a well, yes.
getting ready for the cooler months ahead. Even if your thumb isn't exactly green, we've got tips to help your garden survive the winter. Check them out at CPR.org. And the timing couldn't be better, with Denver's first snow possibly arriving later this week. But for now, the front range has highs in the 70s. Tonight, temperatures will dip into the 50s. You're listening to CPR News and KRCC. Thank you for listening. It's 8
Okay.
Saturday at 10 and Sunday at noon on CPR News and KRCC.
Support for NPR comes from the station and from the Council for Interior Design Qualification, whose mission is to assess practitioner competency to create design solutions that safeguard public health, safety, and welfare. Learn more at cidq.org/NPR. From Carnegie Corporation of New York, working to reduce political polarization through philanthropic support for education, democracy, and peace. More information at carnegie.org. And from the sustaining members of this NPR station.
I didn't get through all of
This
it.
is Weekend Edition from NPR News. I'm Aisha Roscoe, and it's time to play the puzzle. Joining us this week is Will Shorts. As always, he's the puzzle editor of the New York Times and the puzzle master of Weekend Edition. Hey there, Will.
Good morning, Aisha.
So, Will, would you please remind us of last week's challenge?
Yes, it came from David Dickerson of Tucson. I said the city Utica, New York, when spelled out, contains 12 letters, all of them different. And I said, think of a well-known U.S. city, then when its name, city, and state is spelled out, contains 13 letters, all different.
Los
And
Angeles.
amazingly, there's only one well-known city that fits that description. It's Jasper, Wyoming. But listener Ed Peg Jr. did some research and found some lesser-known, smaller towns. There's a town in upstate New York called Big Flats, New York. It has a little over 7,000 population, has 15 letters. Also Bucksport, Maine, and Lynchburg, Texas, each has 14 letters. But our answer is Jasper, Wyoming.
Okay, well, there were more than 1,100 correct entries, and this week's winner is John Meissner of Estes Park, Colorado. Congratulations, John.
I'm almost hyperventilating. Have you had anyone ever kind of pass out on this segment?
That would be a first.
And so I have to ask you, John, you live in the beautiful Estes Park. What do you do when you're not playing the puzzle?
So I call myself a historian, so I share a lot of early Estes Park history with folks.
Oh, wow. Well, that is very nice. But I gotta ask you, John, are you ready to play the puzzle?
I'm not ready, but you don't have 30 minutes, so let's jump into the breach. Let's give it a try.
Okay, you're gonna do a great job. Okay, take it away, Will.
All right, John and
Smart
Aisha,
kid.
let me tell you up front, this is a good two-person puzzle. So Aisha, you have my permission to jump in anytime. I'm going to name some things that are in certain categories. Take
I'd love
the
to live
first
in
two
Estes Park
letters
30
and
years
reverse
ago.
them.
Huh?
Then name
I said I would
something
love to
else
live
in
in
the
Estes
same
Park 30
category
years ago,
that starts with
but not
those
now.
two letters.
Why?
For example, if I
Well,
said
because it's at the base of Rocky Mountain
you would
National
say
Park. Come on.
Acura, because Cadillac
So it's
is
a giant
makeup
tourist
car.
trap.
You would take the
I went over
CA,
there
reverse it
when I
to
was a
AC,
kid. I was a
and
teenager. I was probably
Acura
about
is another make of
12.
car, starting with AC.
Yeah, I went there a
The
couple of
first
times.
one is
It was really
Alpha.
neat, but
Lambda.
Those are neat little towns.
you could sit there, you could see the mountains for
Germany.
miles. And they said you see over 100 miles.
Egypt.
Oh, from the top, yeah, you can.
Egypt, good job.
You weren't at the top,
Parentheses.
kind of 3/4 of the way up.
Parenthesis. Okay. AP. Apostrophe.
They had a problem with
Excellent.
people leaving the camp and getting found 2-3 weeks later.
We're looking for Old Testament books.
Oh, wow.
Old Testament books.
You got it, Malachi. Osmium.
Osmium, we're talking elements. Sodium.
Excellent. Nationals.
Nationals. Teams. Man.
Major League Baseball in particular.
Angels. California.
Angels is right. Octahedron.
Oh my gosh, multi-sided. Octahedron. CCO. Something conical. Octahedron.
You got the idea? What's the noun?
A cone.
Cone is right. Defense.
Defense. Defense. Yeah. No, Will, you're stumping me.
We're looking for cabinet departments.
Oh. Department of Defense and Department of Education.
Education,
Okay.
yeah.
How about It Happened One Night?
So it's a movie title. It
In
happened.
particular, Best Picture.
Oh, wow.
Best Picture winners.
Titanic.
You got it. And here's your last one. Eleanor Rigby.
Eleanor Rigby, it's the song by Beatles. Rigby. L.E. Aisha, do you have it?
Let it be. Let it be.
Let it be. Good job, you
Let
got
it
it.
be. Well, John did great at the puzzle.
That should have been a no-brainer for everybody.
Nah, that's not true. You jumped in and helped.
Maybe I didn't understand the rules.
Yeah, thank you for the hints, Will.
Anytime.
How do you feel?
You know,
2 letters.
I feel humbled, but I feel like the most important thing, since I have this platform, is to make sure, and I know all the NPR listeners will, please get out and vote, but I know you have friends, and maybe some of them don't listen to NPR, so make sure they get out. It's really important for our democracy.
Good advice.
That's very nice. For playing our puzzle today, you'll get a weekend edition of Peloton as well as puzzle books. You can read all about it at npr.org/puzzle. And John, what member station do you listen to?
I listen to KUNC in Greeley, and it is a great provider of local news.
Love to hear that. That's John Meisner of Estes Park, Colorado. Thank you so much for playing the puzzle.
Oh gosh, thank you.
Okay, Will, what's next week's challenge?
Yes, name a place somewhere on the globe in 2 words. Rearrange the letters of the first word to name some animals. And the second word in the place name is something those animals sometimes do. What is it? So again, a place in 2 words. Rearrange the letters of the first word to name some animals. The second word in the place name is something those animals do. What is it?
When you have the answer, go to our website, npr.org/puzzle, and click on the Submit Your Answer link. Remember, just one entry, please. Our deadline for entries this week is Thursday, October 31st at 3 p.m. Eastern. Don't forget to include a phone number where we can reach you. If you're the winner, we'll give you a call, and if you pick up the phone, you'll get to play on the air with the puzzle editor of the New York Times and puzzle master of Weekend Edition, Will Shorts. Thank you, Will.
Thanks, Aisha.
What truly scares you? Is it the dark symphony of the night? Or maybe that ancient famed vampire who conducts their song?
Listen to them. Children of the night.
Perhaps your fear is closer to home, like a psycho. Or is it the devil that's seemingly behind it all?
And I am Lucifer, the devil in the flesh.
Whatever scares you this spooky season, author Jeremy Dauber says it's all a part of a long American tradition.
One of the things I love doing as kind of a cultural historian is saying, what is it that we can learn from our popular culture about who we are as a country? And horror is really, it just gets under our skin, it gets into our soul, and it brings all of that out into the light.
I spoke to him recently about his new book, American Scary, a history of horror from Salem to Stephen King and beyond. He says the American horror tradition started even before there was an America, with early English settlers and their suspicions that led to the Salem witch trials.
You have these Puritans, they're coming over from England, they're bringing that past with them, they're bringing sort of their baggage, so to speak, with them. One of the big buckets of sort of American and universal fear, which is that horror beyond, right? They're very religious people, they're people of faith. They think, okay, this world is a small bridge between, possibly eternal damnation or salvation. But the other big bucket is what I call the monster next door. This idea that people next to us, marginalized people, women, people of color, they can be terrors to some of these white patriarchs as well. And what you have then is that combines very neatly in that witchcraft hysteria.
Well, you bring in some works that readers probably would never consider horror, like the narrative of the life of Frederick Douglass. I mean, clearly slavery is horrifying. Can you delve a bit into how slavery and the Civil War helped to make up this whole early generation of horror?
I think one of the things that happens is that at part of the effort to build up support for the Union side was to present to their fellow Americans slavery as the horror that it was. to make sure that everybody would sort of get on the side and be willing to sacrifice to overthrow this institution. And so you have individuals who are able to tell those stories as horror stories. One of the most interesting stories to me, it was a true story of an escaped slave named Box Brown. That was what he was called, because he literally escapes by putting himself into a box and kind of going up north that way. And the point that I make about connections, like you're saying, Aisha, is that it's so similar to all these stories of the time, of premature burial, what have you, that Edgar Allan Poe was making famous.
Those were the stories that were coming from the north, from the Union side. What about the South? What are some of the types of stories that came out of that?
Of course, they view this in a very different way. Fear goes in all sorts of directions, even ways that we may now find quite morally appropriate. And one of the fears that sort of animated the South was this idea of an enslaved person's insurrection. The idea that, you know, you have these individuals, they're in your household in some cases, they're right next to you, they're your neighbors, and because you're doing these terrible things to them, right, the South wouldn't have thought of it that way maybe, but they are going to rise up and murder you in your sleep.
How did we get from the witch trials?
We've all been found guilty of witchcraft and consorting with the devil.
And Frankenstein to Stephen King.
You smoke fool!
And Freddy Krueger.
Well, one thing that I love about, the continuity that you're emphasizing is the way in which some of our monstrous figures, they're the same kind of thing, right? But they change shape over the generations and the centuries. So, for example, we have witches in the 1690s and we have witches in the 1990s, right? But the witches of Salem and the witches of Buffy the Vampire Slayer are not quite the same witches.
Tell me about the spell you performed.
Oh, okay, first of all, so scary. And this giant snake came out of my mouth and there was all this energy crackling and this pack of demons interrupted, but I totally kept it together. And then, next thing you know, Buffy.
In a similar way, it was very interesting for me to watch the first sort of big movie in America, which comes out of the 1930s, and realize that as a Great Depression era movie, it's really about class.
Yes. Yeah, myself.
You have these sort of living dead or undead, working the factories essentially, forever and ever and ever, right? And that's a real nightmare of class. Fair to say that Night of the Living Dead or The Walking Dead,
This isn't a democracy anymore.
those aren't really its preoccupations.
Women were big readers and writers of early horror, but then later on, like in the 70s, male teenagers, you really get into this like slasher. How did that happen?
If we're talking about a period of the slasher kind of reigning supreme in some way, right? That 80s period, very big. And I think this gets to, an interesting thing about the 1980s, which was a period that was marked by sort of the Reagan kind of moral majority era and the AIDS crisis, is this idea that sex is scary. Something a teenage boy finds very scary at times. We have all these slashers who are punishing people, mostly women, quite frankly, but punishing people who are sexually active.
Did you know that a young boy drowned the year before those two others were killed? The counselors weren't paying any attention. They were making love while that young boy drowned. His name was Jason.
And I think that was a way of sort of dealing and thinking about those fears without actually, expressing them so explicitly. You could say, oh, it's just about a summer camp, in which things go horribly wrong and this person is targeting teenagers in the Friday the 13th movies. But it's, it's about something underneath that.
We talked about the spiritual horror of the past. What are those fears that you think are driving horror these days?
There are so many different kinds, but I think I'll really focus on two of them. One is this way in which we live so much of our lives virtually. A movie like We Are All Going to the World's Fair really shows the kind of terrifying and absorbing and almost suffocating nature of that kind of ability to lose your own identity.
I swear, someday soon, I'm just gonna disappear.
The other is this kind of, monster next door question where, we're in a period of time where maybe people don't trust each other or their neighbor or other people quite as much as they used to. Social media may have something to do with that. And as a result, it's not surprising that movies like Barbarian or Civil War.
You're American, okay? Okay. What kind of American are you?
Are really kind of bringing up this idea, or sort of the new Netflix show Monsters, right, which is about true crime, right, saying, okay, you know, you scratch sort of this seemingly idyllic environment, and underneath there are terrorists.
I mean, you make a great argument for how essential horror is to our collective story as Americans. But do you think that the genre gets the respect that it deserves?
I think increasingly it's beginning to. I think that's right. And I think that usage that we all use of the word genre is kind of an interesting question too, because for a long time, we didn't have these divisions. We're talking about people like Henry James and Edith Wharton, right, and Nathaniel Hawthorne, and people would not have said, oh, I'm looking at them as horror writers, of course, but they certainly were in that haunted house. Part of what I'm hoping to do is not only give horror more respect, which I think it certainly deserves, but also sort of show that long story.
That's Jeremy Dauber. His new book is American Scary. Thanks for talking with me, Jeremy, and happy Halloween.
Thank you, and to you too. Happy Halloween.
Oh, the dead don't die anymore than you were right. They're just ghosts inside a dream of a life that we don't know. They walk around solitude, never paid any mind to the silly lives we lead, or the reaping.
This is Weekend Edition from NPR News. I'm Aisha Roscoe.
Support for NPR comes from the station and from the NPR Wine Club, bringing people wines inspired by NPR shows. Whether purchasing a few bottles or joining the club, every purchase supports NPR. Available to adults 21 or older. NPRWineClub.org. And from Hiscox, committed to helping small businesses protect their dreams. Quotes and information on customized insurance for specific risks are available at hiscox.com. Hiscox, business insurance experts. This is NPR.
I'm Cynthia Lefevre, and I'm a CPR leadership partner. CPR delivers in-depth news about what's happening all over Colorado, not just what's happening in the big cities. I support because information brings change. You can't ask for or rally for the change that you want if you don't even know there's an issue. There's lots of places where you can put your dollars. So support what's important to you, what you appreciate, what you love at CPR.org.
This is CPR News, 89.5 FM, KPRN Grand Junction, 88.3 FM, KPRH Montrose, and 88.3 FM, KPYR Craig. On translators in Gunnison, K210BS, Ouray, K218BE, Parachute, K203FJ,